And welcome back to American Agenda. I'm Heather Childers along with Bob Sellers and, of course, our panel of co-hosts today. Right now, we're going to talk about something that just happened in the House. They voted to remove Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene from her committee assignments, but some are questioning whether or not that was the right thing to do because there was no precedent. It hadn't been done before. And then there are also some Republicans who are now calling for Ilhan Omar, amongst some others, also Eric Swalwell, to be removed from their committee assignments. All of this based on statements that people have made outside of Congress, perhaps even before they were elected to office. So let's kick this off. The vote, by the way, for Marjorie Taylor Greene, Congresswoman Greene, was 218 to 210. Kristen, I'll start with you. You know, as I mentioned, this was unprecedented. Usually it is not handled this way. Does this open the door of this happening over and over now?
It might. I suspect what's going on here, though, is that now that Trump is no longer president, the Democrats need someone else to focus on. That's why we're seeing Marjorie Taylor Greene in the news every single day. But in reality, she is kind of just a backbencher. I mean, she doesn't really represent the GOP. She's no one of particular importance. But we're going to continue seeing her name in the news to drive division and cast Republicans in a certain light. But look, I actually got a lot of hope last week when that whole GameStop fiasco happened, because what we realized is that when you put aside all of these political theater distractions, the American people on both sides of the aisle actually have a lot of the same concerns, and that GameStop story kind of created an interesting coalition of voters from both sides of the aisle. People want the ability to participate in a free market, provide for their families, and work for a living, and it's time we start holding our representatives accountable to actually do work for the people instead of focusing on these stupid, trivial issues that have no impact on most Americans' lives.
Yeah, and that's part of what one side is arguing, Joe, that these people are voted into office by their constituents, and so it's the power of the constituents that should be considered when you're talking about removing them from committees and things like that.
I couldn't agree more. If you look at the Constitution, Marjorie Taylor Greene, she is somebody who applies. She covers every single thing that you have to cover when it goes to running for Congress. She was elected by her people. And here's a person who, as was just alluded to, she's brand new. She's a freshman, doesn't have any impact at all, really, until the fact that she said, I want to impeach Joe Biden. And if I may add, I've had Marjorie Taylor Greene on my show twice now. I asked her about QAnon. I asked her about these conspiracy theories. She says she doesn't believe them. I take her at her word. She's somebody who asked questions. If you watch the videos and listen to her sound bites and watch her tweets, she asks a lot of questions. And in cancel culture, you can't even ask questions. The biggest problem I have with this entire deal is that Republicans can't seem to circle the wagons. They can't seem to say, look, this is in our family, and maybe she's an outlier, and maybe she said stuff we don't like, and we're going to fix it in our family, but you're darn right we're going to support her. She's one of us. The Democrats always do that. And when it comes to Ilhan Omar, they've been circling the wagons around her for a couple of years now, and she said some disgusting things. So I just wish that Republicans would grow a backbone and show that we're one family. Yep, there's an issue in our family. We'll fix it internally, and then we'll come out stronger at the end. This splintering of the Republicans is easy for Democrats. You can't seem to do it to Democrats, though. It's weird.
And Stacey, do you think that is a problem with Republicans, or is it really the media trying to hype this division in the Republican Party right now instead of focusing on some of the good things that are happening?
Heather, it's both. So, you know, they can't focus on division within the Republican Party if there isn't any. And if the Republicans would stop, you know, ironing and de-mothballing their sweater vests long enough to grow a spine, they would realize that there's actually a lot of power that they wield because there are moderate people in the House. They're Democrats, they're moderates. And when I say they're moderates, they're coming from swing districts, suburban districts, districts where they promise to go there and make peace, to actually pass legislation to make the lives of their constituents better. The Democrats have just disenfranchised about 700,000 Georgians who voted for Marjorie Taylor Greene. So she didn't just appear in Congress. She was sent there by the people. And I just want to say one more thing, because I've interviewed her, too. She's spunky. She kind of put a target on her back when she said she'd like to impeach Joe Biden, but that rallied the spirits of millions of Americans who voted for President Trump. And I'll just say this, as far as the Republicans are concerned, if they don't figure out a way forward where, you know, they kept Liz Cheney in power, and they barely supported Marjorie Taylor Greene. They just, within the last 24 hours, finally coalesced around her. If they don't figure out how to support the R and fight the D, we're in for a very tumultuous ride, because if anyone should be removed from their committees and censured, it's Ilhan Omar. She married her own brother, for goodness sake. That's possibly immigration fraud that she committed. And Eric Swalwell slept with a spy for years and compromised our national security. Those two individuals should be removed from committees and then recalled from their seats, so they're no longer serving the American people in Washington, D.C. And we have Marjorie Taylor Greene, who said some things in the past, which all Democrats have done. Mm-hmm. Even Jen Psaki called a sitting senator Lady G, which is totally homophobic and transphobic. And we're the ones who are supposed to be so, like, it's the Republicans. We're all so horrible. So it's garbage.
It is interesting.
Republicans got to go spine.
It's interesting in terms of, you know, the media coverage of these different things and how they get handled and who we are told to forgive and forget and who we're told not to. And it will, you know, because Marjorie Taylor Greene today, the Congresswoman, was very contrite, talking about some of the things that she said in the past. I know, Bob, that you were watching it as well, and saying, you know, I learned and I've evolved. And as Joe was mentioning, you know, she asked questions, and now her opinions are much different than they were then.
Yeah, it seems to me like because of social media now, things take on a life of their own. Mm-hmm. And what I thought was interesting was when she was speaking, I thought she was very compelling. And yes, I've been disturbed by some of the things I've seen her accused of saying or doing or actually having done. And when given the chance to speak today, I thought she made some very good arguments. It's too bad there wasn't some sort of platform, say here at Newsmax, where she could come on and say, okay, and have us ask her, you've been accused of this, what's your position? Because she kind of did that today in her speech. And Joe, I thought it was very compelling.
Well, it was compelling. A couple of things that you may not know. Number one, she went on Dinesh D'Souza's podcast yesterday, and he asked her every direct question that you're talking about, Bob. So you're right. I mean, she is answering them directly. Do you believe that Jews had some space laser that started fires? And she said, absolutely not. Who did 9/11? She said 19 terrorists, and it was funded by Osama bin Laden. So, I mean, she is somebody who, again, asked a bunch of questions, and if you take her out of context, she seems nuts. Were the questions too far sometimes? I don't know. We're Americans. We can ask questions. But let me say this, for those who are confused about her stance on, let's say, school shootings. Andrew Pollack is a very good friend of mine. He's Meadows' father. Meadow was killed in Parkland, Florida at Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School. He introduced me to Marjorie Taylor Greene. He's the reason why I have her phone number. He's the reason why he said you can trust her. She's somebody who does ask questions, but she's going to do great for us in Congress. And for that guy to believe her, and she's being accused by Gutenberg and others who are also parents of those who were killed in Parkland of being a nut job who believes in conspiracies. I'm going to side with Andy. You know, he's a guy who has a personal problem. He's mourning still his daughter. And he says, this is somebody, Joe, that you can have on. And she's somebody who's real, and she's not going to hold back. I think that's good in the long term. I think Republicans and conservatives can rally around a person like that. But think about it. If you're Andy Pollack, do you introduce her to Joe Pags? I don't think so. If you think she's nuts.
No, I mean, and I think the other thing to keep in mind always is, what is this distracting us from? And why is this narrative being fed over and over to the mainstream media? Why is this what we're talking about? So your answers, I'm sure, will vary on that. Stand by, everyone. We have much more to come right here on American Agenda.